Hey, welcome back. Glad you could join me today. And I hope you're going to enjoy today's video. It's going to be a little bit different because somebody suggested that, well, they asked a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to talk about some of them. And rather than doing a demo or talking about a specific problem with your horse or problems that I see or problems that other people see, problems. We're not going to talk about problems. I'm going to talk more about where I live, and I'm going to put things in context, because one of the things that somebody suggested was I should talk a little bit more about where I live and what it's like here, and it would kind of put things in context, because as I said in my last video, we do things a tiny bit different here because of the climate, and that's one of those things that I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to tell you where I live and what the climate could be like, and some of the things that will be unique to our climate. Okay, so where I live, now this is an important factor actually, because where I live, it determines how we do things, and it's kind of important to know this stuff, and that's kind of one of the things that Dennis suggested, is that, if I put things in context, and so I'll tell you, I live in Saskatchewan, the province of Saskatchewan. Country is Canada. I'm in Canada. Maybe I should start there. Canada. Yeah, we're in Canada. The province of Saskatchewan, which has been known as, well, I live in the middle of the breadbasket of the world. That's what it's used to be referred to. Farmers have diversified a lot since then, but at one time, the vast majority of the wheat in the world was grown right here. And the three prairie provinces, there's one to the east, one to the west. The one to the east, which is the neighboring province of Manitoba, there, you talk about flat, man. There are places in that province that are so flat, I wouldn't want to live there. They're just, it's terrible. It's a little too flat for my liking, and you can see for about 30 miles and you won't even see a tree. Not my idea. Saskatchewan, however, we're kind of halfway in between. You go to the west into Alberta, and I should also say, mention that geographically the terrain from north to south can vary a lot as well. The further north you go, the more forest there is, that sort of thing. And going west into Alberta, much more rolling hills there. A different terrain, a different type of soil too. There's more ranching, less farming there, but there is some, different parts, and that's also true in the province of Saskatchewan as well. There is a bit of a stereotype of Saskatchewan that I've heard many times over the years, is it's flat and boring. And, well, depending on where you are, that might be true. There are lots of parts of Saskatchewan that are quite flat, but that actually makes for very good farmland. When you got nice flat land, it's much easier to farm, and especially when it's not covered by trees and forest and hills and rocks, and, well, you get the idea. But truth of the matter is, it's not really all like that. The entire province is not like that, and only the lower third of the province, approximately, is even reasonably populated. It's not a high density population in this province. So that makes things a little bit different than it would for some of you, because some of you live in places that are pretty densely populated. And but there's hills and valleys and rocks and creeks and forests, and there's a lot of stuff. It's not all flat and boring. If you drive through east to west or west to east, whichever, on the main artery, which is the Trans-Canada Highway, driving down that, it looks pretty boring. It's pretty flat, but that part of the province is the part that is the flattest. And if you actually think about it, well, it kind of makes sense that if you're going to build a big highway, that's the major artery east and west throughout the country. If you're going to build a highway like that, why not build it on flat ground? It's a whole lot easier, cost a lot less. So, it's relatively flat. Lots of wide open spaces. I kind of like it that way. Getting into the mountains, and as beautiful as they are, I think I'd feel kind of claustrophobic there. I like the wide open spaces. But that's just the geography, but then there's also the climate here. It's what they refer to as semi-arid. We don't have a great deal of precipitation, so even in the wintertime, we don't get a great deal of snow, we don't get a great deal of rain in the summer, sometimes not enough. The past couple of years, we've actually been having a bit of a drought, so it's definitely been drier than usual. In fact, I'm not sure if I can even remember if it ever rained at all last summer. Must have. I'm sure it did at some point. Anyhow, not when they needed it anyhow. Crops, particularly hay crops, which is important for the horses, have not been good. Although for growing some grain crops, it really doesn't require a whole lot of moisture. So they still manage to successfully grow crops. So that kind of tells you a bit about that part. Temperature-wise, it can range anywhere from 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, which is, I don't know what the heck, 38 Celsius, something? I don't know. Canada is metric. I'm supposed to know this stuff, but I don't. I was already 16 years old when Canada decided to change metric, so I was already fairly well ingrained, and there's certain temperature ranges that just don't matter much to me. I'm more concerned with the ones like room temperature, that sort of thing. Those are temperatures that are relevant, and what's really funny is sometimes I think in Fahrenheit, sometimes I think in Celsius, depending whether it's inside or outside, and anyhow. And then, of course, our extremes in the winter, it can be as cold as -40. This year, there was one day that with the wind chill, it was -53. Just to give you an idea how extreme it can get. Now, that's rare. That's not common. And the +100, that's not common either. Neither one of those extremes are common. But they can happen. Typical winter temperatures, -20 to -30. Even now, it's in March. We're well into March now, and we're still seeing temperatures well below freezing. Today, I believe it's somewhere around -10, which is, it's not horrible. You can still get lows overnight of, -20. And if you're in Fahrenheit, which a lot of my American friends will be, that would be -4. I mentioned that before, just as a comparison. That's just one spot that's kind of my cutoff point, is -20, and a lot of my videos are actually done outside at that temperature, just to give you an idea what we deal with. But that's pretty much my cutoff point. I want anything below -20. It's like, yeah, if I don't have to, I'm not going outside. I don't really care for it much. It's a little bit extreme. So, but like I said, there's places, I'm sure people have never even seen a water trough heater. They have no idea of the things that we deal with. And the extremes of temperatures, the hot and the cold, a lot of people might think, man, that's pretty tough on horses. Actually, the cold doesn't bother them near as much as the heat. A lot of people don't know that. And that's another one of the things where I hope this video is actually going to be a little informative to you as well, because heat is much more detrimental to the horse than the cold. Horses have got a metabolism that will tolerate the cold extremely well. They don't have a problem with the cold. They do have a problem trying to keep cool, though, because of the way that their body works with the cooling. They struggle. The hot weather is really hard on them, and that's why your black horses in hot weather, not good. You're better off with a gray in the heat. If you happen to live in the cold, black horses are fine. And, well, I happen to own a couple grays, so I don't know. I live in a place that gets really cold. I don't know. Anyhow, so that kind of sets things up where I am. I'm in the middle of Canada, in the prairies, right smack in the middle of the prairies pretty much. You go a little further east, it's really, really flat. A little further west, it's a little hillier. But even just within my own province, there is a lot of variation. So I can't just say Saskatchewan is. No, that doesn't work, because Saskatchewan can be a lot of things. And I've traveled enough that I have seen a lot of things. I've seen the forests, I've seen the lakes, I've seen the valleys, the hills, and all that stuff. There's still a few spots I have not seen yet that I would actually like to see. And there's probably places that I should see that I don't even know about. So that's it. I'm going to be jumping around a little bit here. I'm going to have to pause every once in a while and take a look at my phone, and because I got the email on my phone where all the questions are, that I'm going to try to address most of them in this video. And this video could end up being fairly long too, as I address them. How the climate affects what we do. One of the things that personally, the climate has an effect on the things I do. And as many of you will notice in the videos, you'll notice I don't use a bit. And it's got nothing to do with the bit versus bitless argument. It's nothing, no. It's entirely practical, and it's primarily driven, not exclusively, but one of the largest factors in why I don't use a bit is because of our climate. Because winter below freezing temperatures can be, daytime highs can be quite nice and the sun is really warm, but it can still cool off quite a bit at night, which it tends to do here, even in the hot weather. And it can still get quite cold. And sticking a piece of metal in my horse's mouth when it's well below freezing just didn't seem like a good idea. So I thought, you know what, I don't want to, below freezing temperatures can exist for about half the year. And I'm not putting off riding for half the year. No. Some people do actually, but we'll get to that. I decided I wanted an option that would allow me to ride anytime I wanted to, and that option was not using a bit. And when I first tried it, I knew nothing about the whole bitless thing. That was in its infancy. It was just starting to catch on. Now you can buy all kinds of bitless bridles, and FYI, bitless bridles, depending on the style, are not any nicer to your horse than shoving a hunk of metal in its mouth, okay? So don't think just because you're going bitless you're being nice to your horse. You might not be. And, what really has an effect is your hands. How you use the reins, what's holding on to them. That has a far greater effect on whether or not you're being nice to your horse. But anyhow, going back to me not using a bit, is one year, winter was coming on. It was temperatures were slowly dropping. It wasn't horrible that year yet, but it was getting down to the point where I'd take my bit and I'd have it on the defroster in the car, heating it up, and then I'd stuff it inside the armpit, inside my jacket, trying to keep it warm. And then, even then though, as fast as I could, I'd get it into the horse's mouth. And by the time I got it in there, it was cold. And I thought, you know what, this is just not a good idea. In extreme temperatures, that thing's going to be freezing. It's going to freeze to the horse's lips. It's going to cause frostbite on the gums and the tongue. It's going to act like a heat sink and draw the heat out of the horse's mouth. And it is not going to be a good thing. We can't use a bit in extreme cold temperatures. Well, that's my thinking, eh? I'm considering the horse. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try this and see how it's going to work. And at the time I had a fairly young half-Arab, barely trained horse that I thought, you know what, this might not end well. But I decided to take her out for a ride in a halter. And she was actually much happier and better behaved in a halter than she'd ever been in a bit. And we kind of haven't looked back, because the other part of the reason that I don't use a bit is practicality. It's just not needed. Just unnecessary. A bit is unnecessary if the horse is properly trained. And I don't use. I still own one. Somewhere. I don't even know where it is at the moment. I own one though. I know I do, but I don't use it. All I use is my rope halter and my lead rope, because, well, aside from the practicality, which is largely driven by the climate, The other reason I don't use one is I don't have to buy reins, I don't have to buy a bit, and I don't have to buy a bridle, and that can easily save me hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Those three items, I don't know what I know bits can run anywhere from 10 to over $100. Bridles, I don't even know what they are, generally somewhere $50 and up. I'm sure you could probably spend a couple $100 if you wanted a fancy show bridle with lots of bling on it and everything. And split reins, I actually priced it. I looked at a set of split reins in the store one time not long ago. And just for the reins, rather plain Jane set of split reins, were well over $100. So the halter and lead, I already have it. I already have it on the horse. I don't have to spend the extra money. I don't have to switch over. It's just practical. And, you know, somebody not long ago saw me getting on my horse without a bit. And they said, "Boy, you're brave." And I said, "No, I'm thorough." And I started thinking about it. Well, I guess it makes sense because they were into reining where you get penalized for using your reins. And the bit really is almost insignificant in the way they ride. So they kind of saw the logic. It didn't, you know, because one of the myths that you're going to hear, and it's 100% myth, and it's 100% myth, and you will hear it if you haven't already, is that bits give you brakes. That's not true at all. Absolutely not. The brain, I've said this before, the brain controls the body on the horse. And if you can communicate with that brain, you got all the brakes you're ever going to need because that brain can control the body, which gives you the brakes. And if you can communicate with that brain, you got brakes. You know, the bit does not give you brakes. In fact, a bit in the wrong hands can cause you problems. I won't bother elaborating on that because that's not what this video is about. Okay, one of the other questions I was asked was, is the herd here stable enough? Because, I guess I should add one more thing is, where I'm at is, it's a boarding facility. And I don't own it, not unlike pretty much everybody else. I'm a boarder. I just happen to be a long-term boarder. I've been here for a number of years, and I have a number of horses. So, you know, I know my way around the place, and I have certain liberties that some people don't have, but for the most part, I'm just like everybody else around here. And the boarding facility, it's fairly close to a city, and that brings up questions too. Is because it is a boarding facility close to the city, the type of people that are boarding their horses here there's a certain type. And I'm going to get into that in a minute because that's going to help set the stage for things too, is the type of horses that we have. But one of the questions that I was asked, though, is, you know, because we do have quite a few horses here, one of the questions that I was asked was, is the herd here stable enough to be led by a stallion? Now, that's actually almost an irrelevant question because we have mares and geldings together. You couldn't have a stallion out there without ending up with an awful lot of pregnant mares and unwanted foals. It couldn't happen. Now, a lot of people think that mares and geldings have to be separated. They have to have their own separate fields or pens or pastures or whatever. Can't have them together. I don't understand that one. I've never understood it. I've always had them together, and only one place ever did I see them where they were segregated. The mares and geldings were separated. And they had, I think, one, maybe two stallions there as well. That might have been part of the reason they were doing that, to keep the stallions out of the mares, because they didn't want oops babies. And so that would be basically the only thing. Now, if they were separated, stallions and geldings can get along. However, if there's a mare in heat, even within a mile, because they can smell it. Believe me, they can smell it. You and I can't smell it, but believe me, a stallion can smell a mare in heat from a very, very long ways away. And that can cause animosity between the stallion and the geldings. That can cause problems. But You can actually keep stallions with geldings. I've seen it done. Stallions generally, though, in most places that I'm aware of, are kept in their own little enclosures away from all other horses, which unfortunately I don't like seeing any horse being kept that way. So I don't, if you have the option, stallion's not the way to go, although they can be, if properly trained, perfectly good riding horses, and they can be perfectly well behaved around other horses, including mares in heat, if they're properly trained. And I've seen it done. I know it can be done. I don't doubt that it can be done. Just common sense and logic in my mind says that it can be done. I know it can be done. So is the herd stable enough to have a stallion as leader? The herd is stable enough, but you wouldn't want a stallion running around out there with all the mares. And there's absolutely no good reason that I know of for separating geldings and mares. Having them together, they get along just fine. Even when there's constant changes in the herd, horses come and go around here a lot. It's not an issue. It's not a problem. So that addresses that part. No, we can't have a stallion run in the herd. We can't have a stallion running around in the herd, period. Okay, so that really doesn't apply. If the mares and the geldings were separated, could we have a stallion out here? Possibly, but that's just not worth the trouble. And depending on the stallion, if he gets a whiff of a mare in heat, he might jump the fence to go be with them, in which case not going to make a bit of difference anyhow if they are segregated. Okay, moving on. Another question that I was asked was, do the horses work year-round because of our extreme climate? And are they ridden year-round? Now, that's kind of two different questions in a way, because around here in a boarding facility, you won't find any working horses. And the working horses are generally going to be out on farms and ranches, and they're going to stay there. Do they work year-round? Some might. Even in extreme temperatures, you still got to muck out the stalls, clean the barns and stuff like that. And some people will use horses for doing that. They'll put all the manure onto a sled, and they'll have horses pulling it and take it out and dump it, a long ways away from the barn. Things like that. During the summertime, that's more likely when you're going to see horses working. The definition of working is another one, but as far as ranch work, herding cattle, plowing fields, pulling the stone boat, the number of people that actually do that, very small, and the horses that do that are kept on site. You'll never see them here. We have one working horse, sort of a working horse, working breed. We have a Percheron here. And she does nothing right now because she's not even old enough to be working, and the owner's plans for her are not for working, but are actually for breeding. He's going to use her as a brood mare. So the only draft breed that we have here that would be typically a working horse is not working. But when it comes to plowing, pulling the stone boat, rounding up cattle, whatever, that's what I would consider working horses. They can be late horses or draft horses, and those are very rare. Not many people do that anymore. And, there's not much farming to be done in the wintertime, so a lot of them wouldn't be doing much in the wintertime. They would probably just be out to pasture doing pretty much nothing at all, just wandering around being horses. That's what they'd be doing. Now the ones here, the ones that are here are mostly ridden horses. And they're people that just ride for pleasure. There's a few that compete. But now the last couple of years has been a bit of an exception too, in that a lot of events, because of all the restrictions, a lot of events haven't existed. If you want to compete in something, those events they don't exist anymore, or haven't. The restrictions have again come off here, maybe this summer, unless they put the restrictions back on again. There may be more events that they can participate in. because there are people that winter horses here that are barrel horses, reining, cutting horses, but those are actually not a lot, and the rest of them are basically pets. Not many of them are actually even in competitions. Some that have boarded here have been. Not many are actually. Most of the horses here are just, in fact, just pets. Some people come out quite regularly. Some almost daily come out and spend time with their horses in extreme cold when it's well below freezing. Not many ride. If they do, fairly briefly. I haven't really paid much attention to what they use for headgear, if they're using bits or not in the extreme cold. I know the one lady that rides quite regularly is using a type of bitless bridle that doesn't involve a bit, so that's not an issue for her. There are many out here that I don't recall the last time I saw the owners. In fact, I kind of wonder if they even remember they have a horse. Well, they must. They keep paying their board. So they must know they have a horse. So, yeah, some people, there's a lot of variety in the type of people. And, the people that tend to board here because of our close proximity to the city are quite often city dwellers, urban people that they aren't rural dwellers. The lifestyle is very different. And they might not even actually know all that much about horses, but they like their horses. They like animals in general. Some of them, quite a few of them actually also have cats and dogs at home, that type of thing. They like animals in general, but the amount of time that they spend with them really varies a lot. And do they ride them in the winter? That, like I said, year-round, that varies a lot from one person to another. The extreme cold, people tend to ride a whole lot less because, let's face it, it's pretty stinking cold here. And even I don't like the cold, even though I've lived here my entire life. I'm not inclined to ride. I'm a little braver than a lot of people when it comes to riding in the wintertime. But even at that, I'm starting to really appreciate the time I spend riding in an arena. Even though there's not a lot you can do arena, there's actually a lot you can do in an arena. So I actually can do some riding in the wintertime. Most people, no, they don't. They just take the winter off and wait for temperatures that are at least above freezing before they start playing with the horse. Now again, there's another thing that I personally am very cautious about because of our climate. In the cold, even when we get warm snaps and then it goes cold again, you get this thaw-freeze cycle happening, and you end up with a lot of ice underneath the snow, and it can actually be very dangerous, both for you and the horse. So personally, because of our climate, I don't do much riding outside in the wintertime. I just think it's a little too dangerous. That horse can easily slip, fall down, hurt itself, hurt me. I don't want either one of those happening, so I ride very little in the wintertime outside. In fact, I ride not a whole lot in the winter, period. It's got to be fairly good. I'm finding that over the years, I get fussier all the time about the type of riding that I do when it's icy or even muddy and slippery. I'm a lot more cautious. I don't even like riding in tall grass anymore because you can't see what's down there. You don't know what the horse is going to trip on or step on. Is it a sharp rock? Is there some barbed wire laying in the grass? Is there a log there they're going to trip on? All these things. And those things aren't exclusive to the winter. That's things that can happen anywhere. But what we call winter here, a lot of people just call the rainy season. In other places, it doesn't even get below freezing. And like I said at the beginning, some people have no idea what a water trough heater even is. They don't bury their water lines. They don't have to deal with the cold. The cold that we have to deal with can be rather extreme, and it does affect how we deal with our horses and the time we spend with them. Like I say, wintertime, that varies a lot from person to person, but overall, yes, people do much less riding in the wintertime because unless you've got an indoor arena and you're dressed warm, it's not pleasant. And riding a horse in a heated arena is not good for the horse because then the horse gets all sweaty and because of its winter coat, and then you put it back outside. Or if you want to be able to do that, you got to clip it so that it doesn't sweat to death in the heated arena. And then when you put it back out, you got to blanket it. These are all things that a lot of people don't even have to consider, but they're issues that do put a restriction on how much riding people do in the wintertime. Like I say, the working horses, you won't find them here. These are ridden horses mostly. Some are just pasture pets. There are a few horses here that aren't even rideable. There is a couple horses here that the owner of the facility has never seen the owner. They regularly send money, pay their board, but they have never ever been out here. I know which two horses they are. The one horse is completely untrained. The other one that is broke to ride, I have seen it ridden twice in 3 or 4 years, something like that. They're rather sad, nice little mare. Unfortunately, nobody's using it. I don't understand this. Why are people spending money on horses they don't ride? I just don't understand that. But those are some of the things that apply to our climate. You know, a couple of the other questions were, what type of things do the horses do? Is there much carriage work? The answer to that one is not much. I know that there is, in fact, somewhere in this province, there is actually a club of people that specifically do carriage work. But there really aren't many places that are practical to use one. The people around here aren't that familiar with seeing them on the road, so you probably wouldn't get the necessary respect from motorists that would allow it to be done safely. If you go off the edge of the road, the ditches are fairly steep, would probably upset the carriage. There's a lot of things that would, no, there's not a lot of carriage work, very little. There is some, but not much. There is actually a guy that came to Canada all the way from England to do some work. I think he did a clinic of some kind, I'm not sure exactly, with a club, a local club that does carriage work. And that's his specialty, actually, is driven horses. He tends to specialize in carriage horses, that sort of thing. And so that's one of the things. He came all the way from England to Canada at the request of this organization. So yeah, there are some people that do carriage work, but not a lot. There aren't many places you can use one, so no. Another one of the questions, do horses get used for logging? Well, logging would be done primarily with the larger draft horses. And where I live, absolutely not. There's not much logging being done. I think you'd probably have to go several hundred miles or kilometers away to even begin to see any logging done of any kind. Around here, like I said, we live in the prairies. We don't have the big trees where lots of logging is done. You'd have to go quite a ways away in order to see much of that done. Are horses used for logging? Yes, in some places. Not a lot, though. Most people still think that machines are the way to go. But I think there is actually a small percentage of people that are starting to see the value of using a horse for a lot of different things. And I think horses are actually being used more commonly all the time. So do you see horses being used for logging? It can be, you can find them, yeah, but not around here. So like I said, around here, horses would be primarily used for things like plowing a field, maybe pulling a stone boat, which for those of you that don't know is basically a sled that drags over even in the summertime, is dragged over the dirt, doesn't have wheels, and is used for moving the stones, removing the stones from the pastures or the fields where the grains are growing, because large stones can do a lot of damage to equipment. So you For the purpose of farming, you actually want to remove a lot of the stones. So that's one of the things. And like I said, ranchers will frequently use light horses for herding cattle, sorting them, that sort of thing. And moving the manure out of the barns, that sort of thing. That's basically the limit of what I call real work. The rest is pleasure. There is some competition. Others, they just around here. Like I said, there's very few horses on site here that are actually used for competition that would be ridden hard in the summertime. There's barrel horses, reining cutting horses, that type of stuff. But most of the horses here are just what is referred to as pleasure horses, which I find is a kind of a funny term, and somebody else made comment of it one time, and I thought, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I don't care what you do with your horse. They're pleasure horses, really, because no matter what I do with my horse, it gives me pleasure. I get pleasure from just being with the horses. So in that respect, they're all pleasure horses. So do they get ridden in the winter? Not much. Very little. And unfortunately, some of them don't get ridden much even in the summertime. The competitions and that, there are rarely any in the wintertime anyhow. So that kind of stuff, aside from the fact that our climate pretty much, and I don't know if that's just a seasonal thing. People have more free time in the summer, during the summer holidays, for the competitions, or if it's because of the climate. I don't know. I really don't know that one. I can't give a good answer to that one. I haven't done a lot of research on that one myself, so I can't give you a great answer to that one. Another one of the questions that was asked was, because where I live, and I don't think they realized how close I was to the city, we're not very far from the city, the largest city in the province actually, which by many of you, your standards is pretty small. It's 250,000 people. Some of you might think that's big, some of you might think that's a small town. It is actually the largest city in the province. The second largest one is very close behind. After that, you get down to populations of maybe 100, 150,000 people type of thing, and there aren't that many of them. The entire province has a population of about 1.3 million people. And you could probably, to give you an idea how big the province of Saskatchewan is, you could probably take Texas, which a lot of people consider to be a pretty big place. You could probably put 5 Texases in one Saskatchewan, or maybe more. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. But realistically, though, there's a very large portion of the province that isn't even inhabited. Well, there might be some hermits living up there that we don't even know about, but there's a large part of the province in the north that is entirely uninhabited. There's no roads, no nothing. So we won't even talk about that. But even in the part that is populated, it's still pretty big. And the population is not real dense, it's spread out a lot. But getting back to the city, like I said, we do have a city not that far away. You could ride there. Just riding to the edge of the city and back would be far enough for most people. Not many people would want to ride any further than that, because I think it'd probably be about 10 miles, 15 kilometers, whatever, something like that, approximately. Do people ride into the city? Do people ride in the city? It is lawful to ride in the city. I have seen horses in the city. I would not recommend it. I don't think it would be safe. Most horses are not conditioned or prepared for the congestion of the city. People in the city are not familiar with horses that much. You don't see a lot of horses in the city around here. It would be, you wouldn't get any respect from the other people. There'd be no courtesy. It's not designed or set up for safe riding in any way, shape, or form. Like I say, I have seen it done, but in most cases, to traverse from one place to another within the city, you would have to cross some very busy roads that would be quite dangerous. There's also some freeway type things that have high fences and walls, and that you'd have to get around somehow. So can it be done? Yes, it can be done. It's lawful. There's nothing against it, but it is done very rarely, and I would not recommend it. It's done, like I say, it's done very rarely. I don't know anybody currently that has ridden in the city, and I wouldn't recommend doing it at all. I don't think it'd be a good idea at all, regardless of the time of year or the climate or any of that. But that is one of the questions that I got asked, so I thought I'd address it. Is do people ride in the city? No, very rarely. And I wouldn't recommend it because I don't think it would ever be safe to do. One of the other questions I got, I think I'll put a wrap on things after this one, is do people exercise their horses regularly? And that's kind of a trick question that I addressed in another video where I talked about why I do not lunge. And I think I covered it adequately in that one, as whether or not you need to or should or all that good stuff. I don't think I need to repeat myself again in this one. Let's just say I don't think it's necessary. And because of the facilities that we have and the very large pastures that we have, there's absolutely no reason to be doing it at any time of the year around here. And could it be done? Yeah, you could do it. Does it need to be done? No. Do people do it? No. When we get extreme cold, nobody even bothers to come out here anyhow. So even if they were regularly exercising their horses, I can bet there would be a good chunk of the year that they wouldn't be doing it anyhow because it's just too stinking cold. So that pretty much covers that. And if you want to know more about it, go back to the video that I did where I said why I do not lunge, and I explained all about lunging and the benefits and drawbacks and exercising horses and that sort of thing. I talked all about that in that video, and I'm not going to repeat myself. So, well, even though it did turn out to be a much longer video than I'd originally planned on, I do think I answered all of the questions that I had in one video even. That's amazing, but it's going to be a long one. But hey, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting, informative, or, well, better than a kick with a frozen muckluck. Have a great day.